lot better right there. What does sitting down and selfies and content have in common? You guys! I thought that was going to be a joke and everything. No. Alright, let's start with sitting down. How many of you like to sit down? I am so with you. I'm not one of life's dashers. Right, I have a gym membership, I take the card out, I put it back, that's more than enough for me. I quite like to saunter everywhere. At the beginning of a project, there is an awful lot of dashing about, as far as I can see. We're all jumping up and down every 5 minutes, going and doing lab research and remote research and all this sort of thing. Brilliant, there is a time and a place for that. But I have found that some companies don't like spending money. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Is this a new thing for you? Hands up if you've been in a situation where they said, oh, we've got a content project, we've got a design project, we've got an IA project, we've got a project, you've got 3 weeks, a blank sheet, and no money, go! Anyone? Yeah. I thought so. Today we're going to go through a few steps of some stuff that I've done when I've been presented with that problem. Forgive all the thinking. Okay, there is a massive caveat warning thingy today. There is nothing like doing really good user research. There's just nothing like it. Getting close to your users, understanding exactly what they're doing, there's just nothing like it, and I don't think that you can replace it. However, if you are in a situation where your company doesn't like spending money, there are some other things that you could do that might get you a bit closer. So, have we all signed the waiver that Sarah has not said research is rubbish? Yes? Okay, good. Moving on. This is where I start my journey. That's my kitchen. Ever-present cup of tea there. This is where I think we should all start the project journey when we've got a new thing going. Not on my kitchen table, obviously. I love you all, but could go a bit squish. At your own kitchen table, thanks very much. There's a stack of stuff that we can do with desk research, can't we? I'm not going to go through Google Analytics because you probably all do it. You do it to get your language, you do it to get some of the journeys backwards and forwards, so I'm just taking it as a given that you already do that. But there are some other things that you could do, and there's some other things where you can quite legitimately stalk your users in a polite, respectful, legal way. Sort of. I'm going to use the dictionary definition of pursue or approach stealthily. Now again, caveat, I do not mean be weird. Yes? I don't mean follow people going, she likes me. None of that. I know she does really. No, none of that. I'm talking about getting to users without actually having to speak to them. Possibly should have thought about restructuring that sentence. Getting to users 24 hours a day where they're very chatty and they're very lovely, but you're not actually interacting with them. There is a place where you can go, where all your users are, and they're using their language, they're using their mental models, they're giving you IA things, they're giving you classifications, they're giving you truncated models. Do you know where?
Twitter.
Facebook.
All of those places. Plus, not space. Forums. Forums. You could go to space. Don't think there's many people there. Just saying. Unless, of course, it's Matt Damon and he's lost again. So, they're little worlds. They're little worlds full of squishy, lovely humans doing what humans do, which is generally talking, ranting, or flirting with each other. It could be any of those things. It depends on the product that you're doing, and the product that you're creating depends on which world you need to go into. They're also using their digital language. So just a little note on digital language. We all go into labs, don't we, to listen to people and how they speak and their vocabulary so that we know what we should be doing for their labels. I'm going to tell you another story. We were doing a benefit, and I was watching some testing, and we were saying to them, in the benefits process, you can do this thing where if the government says, no, you're not eligible, you have a legal right to go back and ask them to review the case if you think that you have a strong case and that the decision is wrong. We spoke to a woman, she was a brilliant participant, and we said, what would you do? You've been told you can't have the benefit, show me what you would do. And she was talking for quite a while. She said, oh, I'll do the appeal thingy, right? Because I know I can go back. So I'll just do the appeal, and I'll get them to look at the case again, and then I'll go, and then we'll do that. And I'm like, right, lovely. Can you, what would you do on the screen? And she turned around and she went, mandatory reconsideration. At no point had she said that, because she didn't think mandatory reconsideration. Please, when do you shoehorn that into a sentence? You don't, Vogley. You do when she knew what the government wanted to tell her, like green storms. She's there, she wrote, and she turned around and she wrote it. Now we know, we don't look at one participant, we're going to have to look at a whole load of others, and where am I going to put appeal thingy in the subhead? Not really sure. So we have to look at those sorts of languages. Now with the advent of more voice-to-text searching, I think we're all going to have a whole lot of fun with that, but hopefully I'll be retired and somewhere in Barbados and you can all sort that out. So I think the language will change, but right now we need to take the digital language and the kind of vocal language and stuff that we use every day and work out what we want to do. It's not necessarily the same thing. In forums, that's what people are using, their digital language, because they're still typing it. So with that in mind, this is where selfies come in. I was going to make you do selfies and do this sort of thing, but we're probably running out of time, so I'm not going to now. That's my cat. That's the view I wake up to every day. It's a kid's cat anyway, it's not even mine. This is selfies, so this is a cat selfie, right? That's why it's there. People are chatting on the web all the time. They want to make their stuff public. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the internet writing it down, would they? So they do want people to interact with them, but usually for the subject and the task that they're doing at the time. So us coming in and stalking them, dodgy ground, if I'm honest. But there is a way that you can do it in a polite, respectful and legal way. One, you have to have an open and respectful mind, which you know, and you do all the time anyway. You go in, you don't have any assumptions, and you take a look at what's going on. You have to have a look at several forums. Forums often have moderators that use certain language or will push you in a certain way, or there's an ever-present clique. Have you been on those kind of forums? Where there's always about 3 o'clock in the morning, they're there. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're there. 5:10, they're still there. I don't know where these people sleep, but they're there. And the way that they use language and the way that they push things, they can warp it for you. So you do need to go to a whole load of different forums. You can follow the patterns, that's where your expertise comes in, because you need to work out what the patterns are, what the language are, what the language is, what the kind of classifications are. You can pull all that and you follow threads. That starts to give you your mental models. People will tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it. I'll give you an example of when I did this. I was, again, it was for a government organisation, and they said, you've got 3 weeks, a blank sheet and no money, Sarah, go. As I was telling you earlier. They wanted a section on mental health. They didn't narrow it down any more than that. Mental health, go. It's like, bit wide as a subject. And I literally had nothing. So I went into a whole bunch of forums, and it's quite a difficult topic, actually. It's quite hard because it's so wide. That could be just anything, and as government, you kind of need to cover everything. So, first of all, it's kind of what is the user need, what do people actually need from me? The thing that I found you can't even see the slide, there we are. The thing that I found came out top of every forum that I went to was, who are all these people? Right, so people will go to a doctor, give them their symptoms, and then they say, lovely, now you can see a counsellor, a psychoanalyst, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you can see your community mental health nurse, you can see all these people. And they're sitting there going, I've come here with a problem and you're suddenly giving me a list of people, and there's stigma attached to a lot of these things for a lot of people, and I don't know what you're doing. If you break your leg, you go to A&E and somebody passes you up, don't you? It's easy. If you're ill in the first instance, you go to your GP, your general practitioner, and they sort it out. Suddenly, there's all these people with psycho written at the top of any other name. Psycho toilet. It's like, why are we going to him now? So, and this was causing stress. It was causing a massive amount of stress for people who were already in a stressful situation. That that came out top. I went to 5 forums. It gave me a content plan. I then knew what I was saying because I knew exactly what the problems were. It gave me a priority in the who's who was first. It gave me mental models. I found out a lot about how people got to the internet. Why were they on the internet, right? They'd gone to see a physical person. They'd gone to see a GP who had given them specific tailored advice to them, and yet they were still going to the internet. Why? So there was something. And it gave me their journeys. So once you found out who and what and why I was talking to this person, why that person with the same symptoms as this person were talking to 2 entirely different type of people, it found out what the next step was, and the next step was often medication. So why some people have some medication and some don't. It gave me a whole section. I put it up, I went back to the forums. The forums that I went into, I didn't go into any way you had to sign in or have a password or register in any way. I didn't feel that was appropriate. I just went into the ones that were completely open, and I went back, I admitted what I'd done in every thread that I did, put the section up and got a lot of positive feedback from it. So it was kind of fine. You do have to be careful when you're doing this sort of thing, particularly around health. If you have any sort of inner troll, leave it at home, or don't do it in the first place. That's an example of doing something when you have nothing. Now I'll give you an example of doing something. Oh, look. And pretend I've said all that stuff. Good. This is a technique that we use when we have something. So that's starting with nothing. That's blank sheet. This is anything. So how many of you have got these? Aren't they lovely? I love them, even for them. So this was done by an incredible guy called Ian Ansell. He's a Simpsons wife. Each of those black things, no, you can't see, you don't need to. All of those black kind of lines are titles of bits of content. If there is a strong correlation between one bit of content and another, it's all that squished bit, that red bit, and the green squishy bit. The stronger the correlation is the thicker the line. So if you already have information, you can use these a lot better to get everybody around the organisation to understand why you're doing things. Have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to put content in one place and you've got something else somewhere else and somebody said, I don't want my information next to that? Have you ever had that? Yeah. Okay, it's not the same thing. Yes, it is. Well, users think it is. However, caveat here as well, if you're doing something from scratch based on user needs, that may not bear out, because that only tells you what you've already got. Doesn't tell you what you necessarily need. However, if you are just tweaking a section, still at your kitchen table, sitting at home, you get somebody funky to do things like this, and not only do you feel good because it's really easy, but you can start to convince your organisation. It's a lot easier than giving them a spreadsheet. Hands up, do you like spreadsheets? I'm joking, I love you. Okay, so visualising it is easier to use, and it can give you conversations about where your content is going, which leads me nicely onto content. So, what comes first, IA or content? Right? Hands up for IA. Oh, content. Oh, both together. Okay, some of you are not putting your hands up. What comes first? I'm serious. What comes first? If it's not content, IA.
The IA is in the content.
Oh, that's why he's wrong today. So, I don't know why you people and me need to have a chat later about what else there is, because I'm missing something here. There's a lot of different views about this. The argument will range on. That is supposed to be chicken egg, but the chicken's cuter, I think, than the chicken. But I think it's better if content and IA are done together. This is taken from a research thing. The URL is there, and obviously it's up on SlideShare now. People act in part upon myths, basis of myths, dogmas, ideologies, and half-baked theories. I think that this perfectly sums up human beings. Don't you? We all think we're rational. We're not. Sorry. this is kind of how we work. Alistair touched on it earlier, right? The two bits in your brain. You've got the, I can't even open the water. You said I can be flat. 2 bits in the brain, right? You've got the neocortex bit here, right? And these are all, this is where language happens. This is where your language processing stuff happens. And this is people, they're having afternoon tea with scones. It's gorgeous. And then you've got the people over here, and you've got the limbic bit of the brain. This is where decisions happen. This is where feelings happen. Intuition happens. Your amygdala's in there. Loads of emotions everywhere. They're having a total party. They're the people that are kind of like half drunk going, I like it. Whereas the other people are having tea. But they don't actually, they're in different bits. Yeah? And they don't cross. Language processing doesn't happen with that instinctive bit, that more feeling bit. So when you're looking at content and you're looking at a website and stuff, the first thing that is majorly impactful actually is trust. If you don't trust the site, what do? You bounce straight back out of it. Doesn't matter how good your journeys are. Doesn't matter how good your content is. Doesn't matter how funky your videos are. If they don't trust you, they're going to disappear. So whilst content and IA, I think, should work together, I think design is in there as well. So I'm going to tell you another story. I will whip through these really quickly because I realise that we're late. Sarah. Sometimes IA problems aren't IA problems. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you been in that? Little. I'll give you an example of business information on WK. It's the only WK example I have because the lovely ladies are going to go more into it. We had a situation where the department wanted to put up information about how people should decide what sort of business they should be. So if they're a startup that's starting from scratch, should you be a limited company, should you be self-employed, director, whatever. One of the user researchers at GDS, fabulous when they did some work and went out and found that people don't go to the internet to find out what sort of company they should be. They just don't. What they do is they sit at home and they think, I'm going to do this. And then they chat to their friends, and then the friends say, oh, I've got a friend who did that, and they chat to them, they have a mental model, they go to government, and they say, I'm a limited company, go. Tell me how I do this. I'm going to be self-employed, go. Tell me how I do this. She did some wonderful, really, really robust research that said you are too late if you stick stuff on the internet. Department didn't like it, and the content went up anyway. That's a whole other story. The fact is that content, it's seen as an IA problem. It's kind of, well, people can't get there. Yes, they can. They don't want to go. You're too late. You need the nudge unit. No, you don't go UK. You need the nudge unit. You need to get into their path. The second story I have is more content-based. At the beginning of the beta of GovUK, I'd written some lovely content. It was so shiny. It was to the new style guide, which I was dead chuffed with. And we put it up, and the participant came in, and she was really savvy. She was one of those ones that just, she just said everything that she thought all the time. She was brilliant. And she kind of read this page, and she squinted, and she looked at it, and she sat back, and she said to the researcher, is that from government? The researcher said yes. She said, no, I understand that. I don't trust it. She went back to Google. And she didn't trust it. It was written in plain English, it had contractions, it had subheads, it was perfectly architected, it was gorgeous. She didn't trust it. She started straight back off. And she wanted to go and look at something else. That's what I mean about trust and all the disciplines working together. Because at the time I was mortified. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to turn it straight back to what it was. I'm going to have to write awful. No, I don't. Ben Terry came in, black line, big crown. We can still have the style guide that we wanted. So sometimes an IA problem isn't an IA problem, and again, sitting at your kitchen table, you can work those things out. So I have a dream. It's not that speech. Oh, flipping heck. I have a dream. Yeah. Ta-da! Scrabble. No. All the disciplines working together, I think that you only get exceptional design if you have all the disciplines working together. And that would be great, right, if we could have that all the time. However, Reality mostly bites our butts, and you have to do what you can with what you've got at the time that you've got it. And you just have to kind of be realistic. And sometimes if you're in forums and you're stalking people and all the rest of it, that's what you can do. And if that's the case, you are further ahead than you were several weeks ago, or whatever. My top tips: 1, sit down. I love sitting down. It is my, well, next to kind of lounging, it's my favourite activity. What do you know? There's a thing called, has anybody heard of Dave Trott? He's an advertising guy, there you go. He's an advertising guy. He's got a book called 1 + 1 = 3, and it's very, very good. And in it, it says something like he makes all his people sit down and write what they know about a product before they go and do any research. Try it with your teams before you know anything about the thing that you're working on, because that's probably what everybody else knows, and that can be the start of your mental models. We did it recently, it was just really interesting. Analytics, you already do. Forums, go stalk people nicely. Stealth research, that's asking people like receptionists, people in bus queues, whatever. Your expertise will allow you to sort the wheat from the chaff. Yeah? Your experience, your background, your talent allows you to do that. Asking somebody anything will give you something new. My last thing is time spent learning can't be a waste of time, and it can't be. Even if you're validating what you already know, it's still good. You still don't have to go to a lab if you don't have time. You can ask basic, squishy human basic questions. I'm rushing. Thank you very much.